What was your very first dream?
I would say to be a professional footballer. In the UK in particular, like you've got the Premier League, which is the biggest league in football or soccer. Do you guys say football?
Man, football. yeah. Football.
No, do you say
real
football or
football.
soccer?
Real football.
I say football now that I hang out with Jay. You know?
Nice.
Real football.
Good influence.
Yeah, real football.
No, but to be fair, I actually don't have a problem with people saying soccer. Like, it's a global sport. People can call it what they like, as far as I'm concerned.
It's interesting what you're saying, because I think for me too, growing up in London, if you ask me what, and I think we're around the same age, I think, or maybe I'm a bit older than
22?
you. Yeah. 21. yeah. But I remember as well, like all I ever wanted to be was a football player.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know this.
yeah, it was, I love, if anyone asked me today what my first love in life is football. I love football.
It's not
Absolutely
Roddy.
love football. No, oh yeah, forgot about that, sorry. Absolutely love football, watching it, playing it, whatever. I was never as good as you are or were or whatever, and I was never close to making it. I'm Indian, right? But what I do remember is I had this amazing coach, and I was playing in my area, and he was incredible. And I feel like he trained me in so many life lessons as well as football lessons. And he had this one that stayed with me, and he'd always say to me, and I was only like, 14 years old? And he'd always say to me, he'd say, if you lose, you cry for a night. And if you win, you celebrate for a night, and the next day you get on with it. He was like, you get one night to celebrate or cry, and then you move forward. And I always thought that was such a great rule for life, because, you know, often what we do is we get stuck in the bad times, and you focus on the bad times for a month.
Yeah.
And the good times, you just let them roll by because you don't get time to celebrate them.
Yeah.
And so I always thought that was useful. But the reason why I brought that up is you were actually really good at football. You still are really good at football. And I'm saying this from as a viewer, not only are you entertaining, not only were you in Arsenal's academy, right? You're like right there. So yes, a lot of us have a dream to be a football player or a professional sports player. You didn't just have a dream, you actually went through with it. And as far as I know, you were like 17 years old. Walk us through that moment when that dream kind of started to crumble, because I think a lot of people can have a dream. Some people have a dream and make a plan. But some people make a dream, have a plan, and get really close.
Yeah. So I was definitely close, but ultimately not good enough, according to, you know, the people in positions of power, which you have to accept. But yeah, I really gave it a good try. But like I said, I was 16. I actually started playing football for a team really late, and I picked it up quite fast. But I had really not much experience playing actual 11-a-side football. It was more just like practicing stuff on my own, techniques, but it's totally different to playing a game against, you know, you've got competition, opponents. So, but then when I was, I must have been 14 or 15, a coach called Ray Lee, who actually used to play for Arsenal, he saw me and he was like, I want to give you a trial at Arsenal. He was a scout as well. So I couldn't believe it. I was like, yes, let's do it. So he sent me down there. Typically you have, it was a 6-week trial that you'd have at that time. And I did the 6 weeks. I must admit, I was terribly nervous, truthfully out of my depth, because experience-wise, it was like, wow, these guys, they've been playing at this level for years. And I'm like, ooh, this. But I started to get more comfortable. And I by the end of the trial, they extended it. They actually extended it to an 8-week trial because they weren't sure. So you talk about like close, I'm and ahhing, but ultimately they said no. It was a great experience. And what I use it for now is to try and draw from that experience to help the next generation. So there's a lot of kids around the world who are trying to make it to be a footballer. And obviously in that moment where you get rejected, I cried, I was devastated, I was really sad. The guy who actually broke the news to me, he had a really tender touch with it. He was really sensitive. It's a horrible job to have, to tell kids, we've decided that we're not going to keep you on, or you've not passed the trial.
Yeah, that's intense.
Tough, because these kids, their hopes and dreams, but he had mastered it. And I know you guys are very in touch with that, being sensitive and caring. And that's the word I'd describe him. His name's Roy Massey. He was really caring. He actually reached out, I think, a year or two ago. I think his kids or nephews or something watched the TikTok.
Oh, wow.
But
those
yeah.
full circle moments I love to share on my videos.
Yeah, man. But he delivered it really sensitively. I use that experience to try and help the next generation. Say, look, you're going to get knocks. Not everything's going to go your way, but it's how you respond. It's how you bounce back. What do you do from this point onwards? Failure is a natural part of the process. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Trust me, when you get to the end, you're not going to regret the things that you tried and failed. You're going to regret things that you didn't ever try. And that's big with me. So I kind of use that as a mantra with my life. If you want to go for something, go for it. Try. If you fail, it's okay. It's okay. It's going to happen. The most successful people in the world have failed probably more than the less successful people because they go for stuff. So yeah, that's kind of my football story. Oh yeah, so from there, I actually had a trial at Spurs.
Oh, I didn't know about this one.
No, I did.
You went to the rival club.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I went to rival club.
And then nemesis,
again,
London club.
Again, didn't get in. I think it was close again, but ultimately not good enough. And I think that they said it did come down. Experience was a big factor. It was a big factor. You're gonna take away one of your academy boys who you've invested in for years to replace him with someone who's a bit of a gamble because he might pick it up or he might not. Anyway, you could go into that. Ultimately, I blame myself, I take accountability. Could my diet have been better? And this is what I tell the next generation. I'm like, you've almost got to look at yourself like a FIFA player with rankings, but there's different stats. So your diet, could it be any better? Your conditioning, what would you give it out of 10? Because if it's not a 10, then you're not working hard enough. Your technique, again, like if it's not a 10, and even if it is, you could probably improve. Your attitude, that's a key one. So when young kids ask me today, it's actually ironic because I get a lot of kids asking me, I want to make it. Have you got any tips or advice? I'm someone who didn't actually make it. But the first thing I say is I ask them, what would you give your attitude out of 10? And then they're usually pretty honest. They won't give it a 10. And I'll say, well, that's the easiest thing to fix. Your attitude, has anyone at the club got a better attitude than you? Has any kid in the country got a better attitude towards your craft than you? Any kid in the world? Because if the answer is maybe, there's room for improvement there. You should have such a good attitude that if someone asks you, has someone got a better attitude than you, the answer should be impossible. As far as I'm aware, my attitude is as good as it can be. There's lots of different attributes, and you kind of want to get as high as you can on each. But that's my advice from
I love that advice. That's great advice, man.
Yeah. But yeah, for me, like, if I look back then, okay, I didn't have the people around me to, I didn't have a dietitian in my family or circle to know what, my diet was terrible. I was eating number one, I wasn't eating enough. I was eating crisps and junk and stuff and fizzy drinks. Conditioning, it wasn't where it should have been. I used to get cramp a lot in games, but no one in my world taught me how to. And it was a bit different then. You didn't have so much access to all the wonderful knowledge on YouTube and stuff. But ultimately, there would be excuses. So the simplest way to say it is, I wasn't good enough because of me. And that's empowering because once you take, you guys, you preach this message. Once you take accountability, that's the first step in rectifying and improving and self-developing. And also when things go well, then you can feel a sense of achievement as well because you're taking responsibility for the good and the bad.
Yeah.
What you're saying really reminds me of like one of my favorite sayings. I always say that if you don't see yourself as part of the problem, then you'll never see yourself as part of the solution.
Yeah.
And people go their whole lives just blaming others for everything that goes wrong. But as soon as you can start to look at ways that you can improve your life, that's when you're really able to start reaching new levels of excellence that you've never hit before. And, I'm thinking about my own sports story now. I didn't get nearly as far as you did in any sport. I was a pretty good tennis player. But, again, going back to, there wasn't a lot of information available. And if you come from a family like mine, my parents didn't know much about sports. They didn't have much time for me. They were really involved in like work and running a successful business. So I used to show up to my tennis tournaments with a bag of McDonald's and a Coke to drink. And I'd be eating like chicken nuggets in between games. I wasn't vegetarian back then. And drinking Coke, and my opponent would be looking at me like drinking Gatorade and like, with all the tennis gear. I didn't have a tennis bag.
Yeah.
I just came in with like a single racket. You always have to bring 2 rackets when you're a tennis player in case one of the strings break or whatever.
Goes,
You're supposed to bring the same racket though. I would have 2 different rackets and I would switch it off. I didn't know what I was doing, but you do the best with what you have, right? What I can relate more to about experiencing like some sort of early failure is at around my sophomore, junior years when I really started taking college a little bit more serious. And, I had a college counselor that was like helping me get on track for getting into a good university. And they're like, you got to take honors classes. And I was like, honors classes? I was taking all the basic level classes. And they were like, yeah, you've got to take AP, honors. And so out of all the classes, like, I didn't know anything about science. So honors chemistry, AP physics, forget that. Math, that was way too hard to learn. But I figure English, I could maybe wing my way through. And so I joined honors English. Like I had to convince the teacher to like let me in because I didn't start in honor programs. And so everyone else who was in that class was just on the honors trajectory their entire, high school career. So I came in as this underdog. And I thought, all right, I need to set myself apart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use all the biggest words that I could find in the dictionary and try to sprinkle them into my writing. And I totally butchered the use of every word. I tried to sound so smart and intelligent that the teacher, after we turned in our first round of essays, gave a speech to the whole class and said, I see one of you are trying to use really big words in your essays. Just a tip, just a little bit of advice, don't try that. Just try to make things sound very basic. I took that to heart, and it was so heavy on me where I thought as a kid that I was done in writing, that I would never make it as a writer. I would never do well in English, like as, a curriculum. Of course, fast forward 10 years today, 20 years today, gosh. I'm trying to age myself in your category. Yeah, I know, I'm thinking I'm 22 over here too. I'm 38. And fast forward to today, I'm a writer. I never thought I was gonna be, right? It's funny how life ends up like that. But at that time, I was really discouraged. And I know I also have a cousin who's a footballer, and he was the best at his team in high school, but when he didn't make it in college, he froze. Like he couldn't get out of that. And he still struggles with that today. And I think about my nephews and like all the young people that I know that they experience some level of failure and they have a hard time moving forward still. And I know how you're talking about it today is more as like when you're in your 30s and you're older, you have this mature perspective. But talk us a little bit about when you were younger, going through that failure. How do you find the courage within you to keep going and even reinventing yourself? Where does that come from?
I'll be honest with you, I've never said this on the internet or in the public domain before. For a long time, and even today, I do feel like a successful failure. When I was younger, in the football world, ultimately, I didn't become a pro. Could I have stuck at it for more years? And yeah, but then stuff started to happen where I got some amazing opportunities in like the content world, and I started to go down that route with a view that I'm gonna go back to football. I'll go back to trying to make it as a footballer. But then, 10, 12 years later, however many years it's been, over a decade later, I'm still in this space and just kind of like going with the flow with it. Britain's Got Talent. You said you saw me first on Britain's Got Talent. I'm probably the biggest flop in Britain's Got Talent history. I got to the semi-finals live on national television in the UK and fumbled the bag massively, dropped the ball, I think it was 3 times. Simon Cowell, Piers Morgan, Amanda Holden, all there. Simon Cowell, buzz, bang. Piers Morgan, Amanda Holden, she let me finish. That was an achievement. I'm so grateful to her to this day for that. I got to complete the routine, but ultimately I failed. I messed up terribly. Again, backstage, crying, devastated, felt really discouraged and really low. Wanted to give up, really. But like you said, that should be something that's temporary. It's okay to feel bad for the first night, but then you pick yourself up and you go again. But yeah, so football, failed footballer. Britain's Got Talent, biggest failure in the history of that show, arguably. I've still managed to pick myself up and do something. And I really hope that's inspirational to everyone watching, and in particular, probably the young generation. Yeah. You're gonna get knocks, and it's gonna feel like this is terrible in the moment, but nearly everything that seems bad that happens to you, trust me, in the future, when you look back retrospectively, you are going to see how that was ultimately for your good, no matter how awful it felt in the moment. And I always use your ex-girlfriends or boyfriends as the prime example for that. In the moment, it's like, oh, devastating. You've just broken up. But then when you look back, you're like, what was I even thinking? So that's life. That's how life works.
I love that. That old haircuts, old styles, old like clothes you used to wear.
We'll look back at ourselves now in 10 years
we're
ago.
Gonna be like,
what are we wearing?
What
was I doing? what was that trim? What was I thinking?
Yeah, and if you don't, your kids are going to do it too.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Someone. But there's so many things that come to mind when you're talking. And by the way, I want you to know, Jeremy, like, everything you're saying is just
incredible.
Unbelievable. And you can tell that it's from the heart. You can tell that it's real. You can tell that it's lived, experienced knowledge. Like, it's not just saying words because they sound good or make sense. You can hear it in your voice. A couple of things came to mind. One was, and I know that you've done tricks and worked with both of these people, Patrice Evra and Cristiano Ronaldo, of course. Like, I've seen you do things with both of them. And for those of you that don't know, Cristiano Ronaldo is the best and biggest, we'll talk about it later, but best and biggest soccer player of all time. We'll get there. Save it for later.
All the Messi fans now are triggered.
In the comments,
They're ready to go for you, Jay.
Yeah. and Patrice Evra too, as a Man United fan, love him. And there's an interview with Evra where he's talking about Cristiano Ronaldo coming to the club. So he's come in as a 17-year-old into Manchester United. So he's super young. He's a new talent. He isn't this world-famous, greatest of all-time legend. He's starting his career pretty much. Like, he's been at Sporting Lisbon for a few years, showed his worth as a youth player, then come through. And he goes to Cristiano's house and he sees all these people around him. And he looks at Cristiano and goes, "Who's that?" And Cristiano's like, "Oh, that's my nutritionist." He's like, "Who's that?" And he's like, "Oh, that's my trainer." He's like, "Who's that?" And he's like, "Oh, that's my chef." And it was like, he was 17 years old, but he'd invested his weekly, monthly income into being surrounded by a great team. And now when you fast forward and he's 37, still playing at the top of his game, it's like, you can see that wasn't by chance. So everything you just said, you can see that advice, even though you're giving it as someone who didn't go down that path, it's great advice because we can see it on the flip side.
Yeah.
And so I do think that's awesome advice. And you sparked something for me. It was, my school used to do this painful thing. I went to a high school, which was considered to be one of the best schools in the country. But what they did every year is they would rank you out of 180 people in your year group against each other for each subject.
Oh, really?
And they'd stick it up.
Oh, wow.
So you got to rank 1 or 180 or anywhere in between for every single subject in school on the big board and sent to your parents.
Wow.
So like math, science, English, whatever, all of it.
That's intense.
And so I remember that all the subjects I enjoyed, which were like art, philosophy, economics, all the stuff that I kind of focus my life on today, I was always in like the top 10, top 25, top 30. And then everything my parents cared about, I was in like the bottom half. Like, so like sciences, I was like 140, like, math, I'm like 110 or whatever it is, like all the stuff. And it's really interesting though, because I've realized I've always failed at life at things I don't love. Like, I've always failed at things I don't love. Whereas what's really fascinating about you is you're saying something that you loved didn't work out, but you found a new way to make it work. And that's what I find so special about what you did.
Well, again, I'm bringing it to kids because a lot of kids do reach out for advice. And I'm big on, if you really put your mind to something and commit to it and give it your all, you got a great chance of succeeding. And I would be a hypocrite to not apply that to myself as well. So after the setbacks, it was kind of natural, to be honest. I went to university, by the way. So my parents said, go to university to get a backup plan. So that was the next move. So I went to university, played university football there. But again, like, it's not the level that if you're looking to make it pro, it wasn't anywhere near the standard. So the logic behind that was get your safety net, get your backup plan, get your plan B, which we could probably do a whole podcast just on plan A, plan B debate. Like, it's you ask the top performers, top achievers in the world, should you have a plan B? A lot of them are gonna say yes.
Yeah.
But then when you say, did you?
Yeah.
They have a fixed, one-minded focus on what they're gonna do.
Yeah,
so it's kind of like, you're advising against what you did. I'm onto you. And I don't know the right answer. But I'm still trying to work that one out. When you observe the top performers, a lot of them, they were, Cristiano Ronaldo, I guarantee you he wouldn't have had a plan B. It was, I'm making it, and that's that. And we'll cross the bridge when we come to it if it doesn't happen, but it's happening. That type of thing. But anyway, I went to uni to get my plan B. And then by the time I came out, I had done some stuff. I had done a movie called In the Hands of the Gods, which was like based around football freestyle.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I'd also done Britain's Got Talent. So then all these doors were opening. And one of the first ones was actually to film a video with Cristiano Ronaldo.
Wow. That's a great video, man.
Yeah.
That's still such a great video.
Thank you.
So dope.
I mean, again, we talk about hairstyles. I had braids. I could barely watch that video back because it's like, you cringe when you watch it.
Everyone's looking at your feet though, so you're all right.
Yeah. Your fade is really fresh right now.
Yeah.
I gotta say.
Thank you.
Especially the way the light's hitting the angle.
Yes.
Is that London or is that in LA?
I cut my own hair.
Oh, you cut.
Wow.
This guy's got a lot of talents, man.
Yeah. I needed to be fresh for this show. Come on, I've been looking forward to it. But yeah, very early on, opportunity to film with Cristiano Ronaldo, and lots of opportunities like that. And also jobs, paid jobs. I used to do stage performances on stage like this often, where you're there and you're doing a freestyle performance and you're getting paid for it. And it felt great earning money. But all of these things were ultimately distractions or taking me down a different path from trying to make it as a pro. So if I had pushed all of those to the side and just dedicated and committed to making it as a pro and done everything that I can, who knows? And that's what I tell the young generation coming through. Like, who is anyone to tell you that you couldn't make it if you really fully committed? But ultimately, it wasn't my path, it wasn't my journey, and I understand it more now. And it's only recently where I've started to understand that, because when you're younger, you don't understand things as clearly. When I'm 50 years old, I'll probably look back at my version of myself today and go, you thought you knew stuff, but you were clueless, boy.
Yeah, oh my gosh,
But one thing I have come to understand is there are phases of life, and it's very easy. We know that comparison is the thief of joy, and it's very easy to compare yourself to someone else in one phase and feel like, I wish I had what they had. I wish I was a professional footballer. They've just got a great life. They get to do what they love every day. As you get older, you start to see that there are pros and cons with everything. Footballers have intense scrutiny from the media. They have intense pressure from the clubs. They have the instability of not knowing for sure when your next contract's going to come, how long it's going to be, if it's going to be at this club, a different club, are you going to get moved on? The intense pressure in games to perform. You have three, 4, 5 bad games. The fans will probably turn on you. The mental health aspect of that, all of those pressures. There's so many things that come with being a top-level athlete, which they might not be right for a lot of people. And as a kid, you just think, this is cool, I want to do this. But maybe the way you're designed, something else is optimal for your life. And I understand that now. And also the longevity, it's a short career, and then you come to the end, probably around about our age. And then what? I've now been around for long enough to actually pay attention to what footballers do next. And a lot of them really, it's a big challenge from going from the adulation and all the praise and the attention and stimulation of performing in front of thousands week in, week out. How do you match that afterwards? So a lot of them kind of go off a cliff and turn to things like drugs, alcohol, depression comes for them as well sometimes. And you start to see that and you're like, okay, there are pros and cons to everything. And yeah, different phases of life. What's the next phase for a lot of footballers? A lot of people wouldn't want it. So, kind of went a long roundabout way of saying it, but the position that we're in today is a really nice one because we don't have to depend on a club keeping us on or a manager picking us to be able to do what we do.
Yeah.
our career is kind of on our own terms, which is something that a lot of footballers don't have in their next phase. So I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, no, for sure. You know, it's incredible. It's not just athletes, right, that go through this. Like a lot of musicians go through this, right? A lot of actors, even a lot of YouTubers. You know, that's why there's kind of this undisclosed saying that says the typical shelf life for most YouTubers is about 4 years.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And, you know, it's not just because of people might lose interest in the content. It's a lot to do with what the YouTuber themselves has to go through. And I think, you know, it's an interesting point as to when is the right time to quit doing something versus when do you keep going? And Jay and I talk about this a lot, right? Because sometimes it is good to pivot if you know when. And I think for me, a lot of times it's like when your passion like coincides with your goal, that's when you can be really successful at something. And, you know, taking me back to my younger self, and I really resonate with what you were saying earlier about the whole, they used to put lists out in schools. Mine was, it might have even been even worse because it was actually an athleticism list that they put
We had a gym list too. We had a PE list.
So I went to this small school, and in middle school, they would rank you on who is the most fit to who is the least fit. And they have a different list for the boys and girls.
That's
and the
painful.
worst part is, they didn't just put this like in the boys' locker room and the girls' locker room. They put this in the common area. So not just like the girl, not just the guys would see who's like the most and least fit on the guys list, the girls would see that too.
Wow.
And in 7th grade, I remember there was there was 4 different contests to measure your physical fitness. There was how fast you could run a mile. There was how many push-ups you could do, how fast you could do this shuttle run, which was like a really fast, short distance and run right back, and then how flexible you are.
Oh my gosh.
I kid you not. I got the lowest score out of every single guy in the school. I couldn't do 1 push-up. I was this obese kid.
Yeah.
And I know we relate a lot to like
I was an obese kid too.
To our child obese horror stories in middle school.
Yeah, we've shared pictures.
Yeah, I was not flexible at all. I could barely touch my knees, forget toes, you know? So I scored last on this list, and man, I was mortified when they published my name as the least fit kid essentially in the school. So that summer, I decided I was gonna turn things around. And I trained harder than I'd ever trained before. And I was determined to make the top of the list when we came back to school the next year. You guys aren't gonna believe this. Not only did I go from doing 0 push-ups to like 30 push-ups, and I increased like all my scores, they decided to stop the practice of publishing that list for everyone to see, and I had no idea. I was like, why did I do all that hard work for nothing?
Yeah.
And so I just immediately became unfit after that because I didn't care. But my passion wasn't really there, right?
Yeah.
I was just doing it simply for this goal and for everyone to know. And then after that, I went back to just eating Doritos and playing video games and computer games. But you know, what I'm really interested in is like, so how did that sort of passion change for you? And then how were you able to reinvent yourself? And it's not like you went from being as successful and as close as you were to making it all the way to, you know, winning Britain's Got Talent and to, you know, a professional soccer team. You made it very far, but then you become this massive creator that is, you know, getting millions of views, you have millions of followers. So how do you go through a transition of when your first dream doesn't work out, when your second dream doesn't work out, when your passions change, how do you go to where you are today of being a content creator?
Have you ever seen that film, The Life of Pi?
Yeah.
Where it's like everything is for a purpose, and you don't understand it in the moment, but as you go through your journey, you're like, oh, that's why that happened. Oh, that's the reason for that. It's like that with me. So I spent tens of thousands of hours through my childhood training football, to learn the techniques in football, which I thought were going to be used as a pro footballer. Turns out they were used with the football content, with the F2, and even football content with my personal stuff.
Yeah. Amazing channel. If you haven't seen it, guys, check it out.
Thank you, brother.
Amazing stuff.
I've pivoted a few times, and I feel like That's a really great question, because some people probably discover new passions. And with me, there's always been this creative energy inside of me. And I didn't understand when I was a kid that that was going to be a massive part of your future. But now I do. So the pivots have been really easy for me because they felt natural, because they're absolutely in line with my passions. Like what you were saying, it's easy for you to do the things that you are passionate about, and you fail at the things that you're not. So yeah, I've got a real passion inside of me to use my creative energy as a force for good. And going back to you guys, like, you are probably the two most inspirational creators to me from the aspect of using social media as a force for good, putting out very positive, very helpful content, very wholesome, very educational, motivational, inspirational, all very positive things, and winning in the space. That's amazing to me, because we all know there's a lot of toxic negativity that the algorithms can push, and for someone looking from the outside, it could be like 50-50. What's the most obvious route to victory in this space? Do I go down a negative route, or do I go down a positive route? And you guys, you are champions for team positive and wholesome and helpful content. And I find that super inspirational, because both of you, you've not needed to tread on another human's head to try and get up the ladder. And that should be an inspiration to all of us, including myself.
I appreciate that.
Man, yeah, so heartfelt.
And it's not easy to do. Yeah, you find a way to be creative, create incredible content, and it's all a force for good. Incredible, guys. Honestly, you should be very, very proud, and so should your families.
Thank you, man.
We're working on the family part.
Yeah.
That's a topic for another podcast.
No, and it's you reminded me of something when you were saying that. I've had the fortune of sitting down with some incredible athletes in their prime, working with them behind the scenes, and then also meeting with athletes after their sports prime. And I was so lucky to interview Kobe Bryant like 3 months before he tragically passed away. And it was really interesting, because he's one of the few athletes that I've met that was happy in retirement. Like, he was peaceful. When you were around him, you could sense that he was peaceful, he was grounded, he was happy doing what he was doing, because he was still aligned with his mission, which was he wanted to help kids learn lessons. And so he'd won an Oscar for these shorts that he was creating, and like life and basketball podcasts that he was creating, and audio content that he was creating. And so he was a storyteller at heart. And it was almost like now he was getting to be that way of inspiring kids. So he inspired kids on the court, and now he was still choosing to inspire kids off the court. And I feel like that with your journey, where it's like, you're looking back and going, actually, kids, I learned this for this, and I learned this for this. Now, when I look at your stuff too, I think, and you're saying about us, and we appreciate that, very heartfelt. I feel the same way about you, that the kind of content you're creating, whether it's the comedy sketches you've created, the characters you've invented, the stories that you're telling, the VFX that you're doing now, like, you've learned so many new skills. And sometimes when I see your content, I'm like, how do you even think of that? Like, first of all, how do you think of that? And second, how do you pull it off? Like, your Muhammad Ali clips in the water, like, I'm like, what? Like, how do you even shoot that to get that? And you're inventing a lot of these trends. I think that's another thing as well. Like, TikTok's full of trends. You've invented a lot of trends. And so I'm like, that requires a deep level of creativity, a lot of obsession, absorption, which I think people underestimate.
Yeah.
That how much obsession it takes to get as good. Let's talk about obsession a bit.
Okay.
Because I can see you switched on when I said that word. Your eyes were just went like,
I've never spoken about it before, so it's interesting, but you understand the game. I'm obsessed with my craft. I'm obsessed with trying to self-develop and become a better version of myself every day. It's definitely an obsession, to the point where I cannot watch content or a movie without being switched on to what they're doing. I can't watch your videos without thinking, this is genius. how he's framed that, the storytelling, the narrative, the light and the shade, the twists, the way he's it's just everything. I see it and I get inspired by it. So yeah, I'm always switched on to my craft. switching off, now that'd be a different conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's your questions on obsession?
Well, no, I think let's start with obsession. So let's do both. Let's start with obsession and go, if someone goes, I think that's the problem. People get obsessed with the goal and not the process.
Yes.
Right? They get obsessed saying, I want to be a football player, I want to be a YouTuber, I want to be a creator, I want to be whatever it is. And we're obsessed by what that looks like, but then we don't get obsessed with the process. So how do you genuinely get obsessed with a process? Where do you start? How do you figure that out? What are the things you're looking for and learning? And I don't mean just social media, I mean in general, because you're doing it across the board.
I've recently worked something out, which you guys will have definitely already worked out, probably way before me. But what I worked out is it's human nature to always kind of need a goal, a target, an objective, something to aspire towards, something to aim for. So I've been blessed in my life to have hit some key milestones and achievements and things that I've wanted to do, and I've seen that as successful. You get there and it's like, I've spent all this energy and time to climb to the top of the mountain thinking that mountaintop, that's success, that is it, that's the goal. Get there, you've made it, you've done it. And you get there and other people will say, you've made it.
Yeah.
But you don't see yourself as made it. I've never ever felt like I've made it. Ever. To this day, I don't feel like I've made it. Why?
You've made it, man. You've made it, we'll tell you.
No, but it's because it's relative to what you define as made it for you, and that constantly changes.
Yeah.
So I always liken it to someone climbing a mountain, and when you're climbing that mountain, you can't see beyond the top.
Yeah.
That's the goal. Only when you get to the top does the horizon open up and you start to see all this whole world beyond it. And chances are there's going to be another mountain over there that you're going to look at and go, I want to climb that one. And that's the new goal. So I understand that now. So I understand that there will never be a point in your life, most likely, it's different for everyone, but for me, I understand I'm goal driven. I like to have a challenge. I like challenges. So no matter what goals I end up achieving, there's going to be another one. And for me, when I was younger, it's predominantly survival and providing based. You want to provide for your family and you want to survive. Like, we never had much money growing up. And you want to break that generational trend. And then once you actually do that, it's like your primary purpose for what you're doing shifts. And now it's about adding value for me, to others, for myself. I know if you do that to enough people, chances are financial reward's going to follow anyway, so you don't need to chase that. And fulfillment, that's super key.
I started thinking about like what my process is in this whole conversation. And so, there's this book, The Power of Habit. I'm not sure if you guys have read it, but it's an amazing book.
I interviewed Charles Duhigg.
Oh, okay. You got to one-up me like
that. No, man.
I thought, I was like, I read this book, you interviewed the author, even better.
No, it's a dope book. I agree.
No, it's
and I actually live with him. We're my best mates.
You're having dinner with him tonight.
He's my best mate.
I see where you guys are going.
I'm joking.
But no, it's one of the first books I actually read because I wanted to learn about this habit formation and what makes people consistent, right? Because that's such an important part of success. And I remember reading about this one study that was done about people that experience like heart attack or stroke. They had to get on very specific health regimens after if they were going to avoid running into health issues again. And so a study was done out of 100 people that experienced some sort of heart attack or stroke, how they were consistent about their diet and becoming more healthy. And the study found that people who wrote down what their target weight was, and then every day wrote down what their amount of exercise was, and then also what their plan to actually eat was, were far more likely to achieve whatever the health or weight goal was. And I found that practice so helpful in my own life that, like, number one, if you have a goal, write it down.
Yes.
Right? Write it down. And then number two is be able to review that goal daily. And whether that's health, whether that's success, whether that's sports or anything else. I feel like that practice applies to everything.
Yes.
And then, yeah, I mean, even telling a friend, I think, can be very helpful. Because if I tell Jay and I say, hey, my goal is to weigh 190 pounds, right? First thing he's going to one up me and say, my goal is 185, you know? He's gonna try to make me look bad with that goal. Obviously,
I have to build up.
Yeah. There you go, a little subtle one up. I like that, even better. I'm just joking. We have a little bit of a height difference, so I don't feel as bad. But you know, if I'm writing it down, I'm looking at it daily, and then even telling a friend, if I fall off, the next time I see Jay, the first thing he's gonna say is, how's your weight loss going, right? And I'm gonna be like, oh gosh, like, thanks for reminding me, now I gotta get back on it. So that's typically the process for me.
Yeah.
But you know, when you're telling the story of climbing that mountain, right? And then you get to the top and then you see another mountain, that's really fascinating as well, because I'm at a point where I started to realize that I obsessed about climbing mountains and success so much that, you know, at first, your goal is trying to, if I could break 10,000 views on a video, you know, and get that comma in my number, like that's a big success. Then you hit that, and then it's like when you get to 100,000, and then 1,000,000, and then, you know, that number just keeps going, yeah, that number just keeps going up, right? Jay's gonna say 40 billion next. But like, so how do you actually start to appreciate where you are in the journey, and then also have that downtime so you're not constantly chasing the next target over and over?
Wonderful question again. You guys ask really good questions.
Hey, you're very.
You should do this for a living.
We should do a podcast.
Yeah, we should start a podcast.
Yeah. I feel like it's probably quite a natural thing when you're very young to be very success-driven in terms of the career arena. But as you get older and you start to get some success, you start to view success differently. You start to view it more holistically. Like, got one life. If you live to 100, that gives you 876,000 hours. 25% of them, if you sleep in 8 hours, you're conked out anyway. So shave off a few 100,000, and that's your time budget for your life. What are you going to do with it? And I heard something that was really powerful, and it stuck with me, and it was people that were on their way out. So they were going to die, and they did a survey of what matters most to you. And overwhelmingly, the things that mattered most to people at the end of their lives was not career-based or achievements or ego-based or, you know, awards. It was relationship-based, like forming meaningful relationships, making good memories, and having a positive impact on the world, leaving a positive footprint, helping people. Those are the things that, when all is said and done, that's what's going to matter most to nearly all of us. So I'm kind of starting to understand that more now, and your perspective on success just shifts. And you start to see being the best father you can be, being the best son, daughter. I heard something really interesting, and it was, I'm actually reading the book at the moment, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I'm sure you guys have read it.
Legendary.
I'm having lunch with him after this, actually.
I wrote the book.
He co-authored it.
There's so much incredible information in there. I'm going to have to, it's the audio
it's
book.
legendary.
I'm going to have to do it like 4 or 5
It's
times
such a
to
great
process
book.
it all. But one of the things that's really stood out to me is it posed the question, what's more noble, to dedicate and devote your life to helping the masses, or to dedicate and devote your life to helping just one person? And I was like, whoa. It's always sort of a thing where, you know, we're aiming for scale. But there is a strong argument to say it's actually more noble to devote your life to helping the few. Probably less glory in it, but probably more noble. So I thought that was really powerful. And now I see success as, have you used your life as a force for good in a way that when it comes to the end, you'll look back and feel fulfilled, content, and happy that you had a positive impact on the world. That is much more valuable than achievements only in the career arena. So I've kind of learned that now. So I see success very differently now to how I used to.
That's powerful, man. That's really incredible to see it, because I think often these conversations can get so lost in, and I'm not saying we don't have these conversations and don't have to, but it can get lost in engagement and views and followers and that count. And that's important when it comes to success and building a brand and building a business. And those things are very valid, significant conversations and discussions and strategies. But if they're not also balanced with this other conversation about what's really important, that's when we lose that. And I think for me, you both hit it earlier when you were both talking about the mountains. And with a lot of the coaching work that I do with the people that I work with, and most of them have ticked off every box of every mountain on the planet, what I realize is that at one point, it stops being another mountain and it becomes a valley. And it's like you stop having to go outward and upwards and you start having to go downward and inwards. And it's like, that's a really interesting thing that I've seen, that after a while you start realizing I can't go any higher because you've gone as high as you possibly can. And then the only way is down and inward. And that journey is really fascinating because it requires some of the same tools and skills, but it's a more spiritual, more internal, more what you're saying on a relationship level. And speaking about relationships, we're all married here. We're all in long-term relationships and committed relationships. And I've met your wonderful wife. I think I met you when you were still dating or maybe just engaged.
She's a fan of both of your stuff. She loves it.
She's amazing energy. Like, she's so fun to be around. She's such a vibrant soul and such a special energy. But I wonder, and we can all have this open conversation because we're all in this position where I think we're all quite ambitious, focused, driven, goal-oriented people. We also want to be good men, good partners, good husbands, boyfriends, fiancés, and I'm sure for everyone else watching as well. How have you tried to strike that? And tell us a bit about Shauna to understand her more and how that impacts your work journey as well.
I just feel extremely lucky and blessed and grateful to have her. She's amazing. Honestly, she's the best thing in my life, for sure. No question, no doubts. And I wouldn't be where I am today without her. She's very patient with me, very patient. So she actually helps me with my business stuff as well. So she'll do the emails, admin. She even helps with account stuff. We've got an accountant, but someone's got a liaison. I'm really disorganized. It's like my brain is wired to be creative, but I struggle so badly organization-wise. And she's really organized, so that helps massively. One thing that you both have done incredibly well is build out a team around you. And that book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, speaks about that, like becoming interdependent. That's my next phase. If I'm going to expand, I need to do what you guys have done so well, which is build out a good team of good people with a good, you've got a great work culture here. Everybody, you can feel that, like, everyone's working towards a common goal, which is positive. That's my probably next phase. But at the moment, it's just Shauna. And she does amazingly. And like I said, without her, I probably wouldn't be here because I probably would have missed the email or something or replied too late and you would have had to book someone else in. But yeah, and she's beautiful inside and out. We've been married for 10 months now, I think it is. Our first anniversary is going to be in September. I could definitely do better with the work-life balance. That's me being totally honest and transparent. She's super patient with me, knowing that I put in extreme hours often. And she's patient and she understands that this is what it takes to be at the top of your game. But at the same time, I would actually be a hypocrite if I didn't, take the advice that I've kind of given in this podcast, which is you got to look at success holistically, and you could be smashing it career-wise, all these followers and views and engagement, but you're neglecting your wife, not spending time with your partner, quality time, which is her number one love language.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So, I'm talking as if I don't spend quality time with her.
Yeah, I know you do. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But what I'm saying, very honestly, is that I feel I could do better with that. We do have 2 dogs which need to be walked twice a day. She does the 2 walks every day. I do at least 1, sometimes 2. But that's real quality time for us because we kind of got this policy where unless we're filming a beautiful sunset or something, devices away, and it's like quality time in nature. We've even done it barefoot a couple of times just to get a bit of
Brave in
grounding in. But then sometimes there's some nettles and stuff.
Yeah,
so
that's what I'm saying. Brave in England.
Yeah.
No, I love how you have a process together for even how much you spend time with your wife. But I do want to just quickly hit on the point that you mentioned that you're a one-person team or like a two-person team, or you have a small team at least. Yeah, because I think there's this perception that you do have to have this massive team to be highly successful. And to some level, you know, that is true. Like I have a pretty large team. I'm sure Jay has at least one more than I do. But I will say, you know, when I started filming my content, I was actually just a two-person team as well.
Really?
And the very first actor that I got to actually be in my videos was my brother-in-law. And we came up with the concept of recording a video involving actors when he had actually showed up to my place thinking he's just hanging out for the weekend. So I think there's a lot of people out there with the dream and thinking that, oh, I can't succeed because I don't have a massive team. So I think it is important to say you can actually get very far just doing things on your own or with your significant partner, especially starting out. I always give the example that I think WhatsApp got acquired for $20 billion and had less than 40 employees at the time that they got acquired. So you can create a $20 billion company with less than 40 people. They still have that same amount of people today. So I think that's really inspiring. But yeah, and then also, I think it's also great to just have a plan in place for work-life balance. That's helped me tremendously. Because if you are someone that's like a serial entrepreneur or you're just an high achiever and you become obsessed with your craft, a lot of the times you don't start to see the cracks that has in your relationship or anything else until it gets to a really bad point. But one of the things that has been really interesting with me as a father, as my new life as a father, is that when you have a 2-year-old, they'll actually tell you. And I don't know how long this will go because my oldest daughter's 2, but my daughter will often, when I'm on my laptop, she'll close my laptop and she'll say, "Daddy, no work. Daddy, no work." And I'm just like, wow, I didn't even realize that I was, you know, working during family time. Or she actually took my laptop yesterday and threw it off the bed because she really wanted me to spend that time with her. And I had to ask myself, like, my daughter is literally begging for my attention right now, and I'm distracted because I'm more consumed by an email or something else. So I had to like completely snap out of it and say, I'm gonna just be spending quality time, no phones, no computers. So I think it's interesting that sometimes, you know, when you have a kid or something, they can help you realize that. But even if you don't, and you're not in that situation, try to have a conscious plan for it. So now, you know, Saturdays I'll work half a day. Entire Sunday is family day, except rare exception where I have to get some work done. And then during the week, I have a 2.5-hour rule where from 6 to 8:30, every single evening, I have to eat dinner with my family to spend that quality time. And I know, Jay, you've got a similar process as well,
similar,
right?
just a few miles then. No, and I love that. I've seen you do that, and you know, Laura's obviously trained the kids well to take the laptop away. Right. No, but you're a great dad, man. I love watching you be a dad, and it's inspiring. I'm not a parent yet, and I see how much Dhar's like so focused and so present with his kids, and you know, you put in a real effort, both of you. I mean, Laura's obviously an amazing mom, but it is really inspiring when I'm thinking about having kids as well, just how you've managed to manage it all. And we had Rebecca on as well on the podcast, and you know, she's just had a kid, and she's you know, again, building with her and her husband, they work together. And so, yeah, I think I agree with you on everything you just said, that small teams are, you know, the best way to start, I think.
To start, but
but then
in the game a long time, and it's like, when are you going to scale, boy? There's a ceiling on how much you can get done in a day. So I used to take pride in it, but now I look at it, it's flipped, and I'm looking at it like, I see it as a shortcoming now. Where I used to see it as a strength.
For sure, for sure. You have this great quote that we love. You said, your quote is saying, you can literally learn something from anyone, even idiots.
Absolutely. Did I say that? Is that one of my quotes?
Well, the team picked it out.
You
were saying nice things about the team. Maybe you change your mind now. But I saw that on the list, and I thought that is a brilliant quote. You can literally learn something from anyone, even idiots.
Yeah. Well, you can learn exactly how not to be for a start. But yeah, you can. My granddad taught me that. He said, told the story of a man. He said, imagine yourself in the desert, walking, trying to find water. and, you know, the sun's blaring down. You're going to die if you don't find water. And you come across a can which has got water in it that will save your life, but it's a rusty can. And he said, basically the moral of the story was, you can still get something valuable from a rusty can. It doesn't need to be a perfect can. It's got water inside it, which can give you life. So, yeah, you can learn something from anyone. I've learned that, even how not to be or how not to act. So I pay attention to everyone now. I get inspired by most people that I meet in some way, shape or form. And I always look to learn. Even if I'm just like in a cab, one of the questions I ask people is, from your life experience so far, if you had to condense it down into one golden nugget before you pass, what's the nugget? It's a really hard question to answer. I'm going to ask it to you guys.
All right, he's flipped it.
So, one golden nugget from your life experience that will help someone.
Yeah, mine's always don't give up. I think it just comes down to those 3 simple words. And I always found that anytime I experienced success in life or greatness in life, it was just after the feeling of me wanting to give up and throw in the towel. So I think a lot of people just give up on their dreams too soon.
You got any, Jay?
Yeah, I think there's one that kind of like my entire work and life and mission is dedicated to. Like, I define my purpose as this. It's like, do what makes you happy and then use it to make other people happy.
Love that.
So it's, you know, your passion is for you and your purpose is for others. And so when you use your passion in the service of others, it becomes a purpose. And I think the part that's missing in the world is everyone wants to find their passion or find their potential. But then what changes your life is when you use that as a contribution, as a service, as you've been talking about, as an impact in other people's lives. And so if anyone's wondering why they're not feeling happy, if they've figured out passion and figured that out, then it's, well, are you using that skill or that talent or that potential to make someone else's life a little bit better? And if you are, that's where the joy comes from. The joy doesn't come from having everything or knowing what you're good at. That can actually be quite dissatisfying. So I think that's the big one. But now you're going to have to answer as well.
You're bouncing my own question.
We have to. It's a big question.
I've rarely ever been asked it, if ever, to be honest. Just being aware of your own mortality. It can be uncomfortable thinking about, we're going to die. We're going to die. We're going to die. In probably 100 years, we're all dead. Sounds savage, but the more comfortable you can get with that, the more you realize that you've got this life and most things you're not going to care about at the end of your life. You know, the little arguments, little bits of road rage where you're tempted to, you're not going to care in 5 minutes, never mind in 70 years. So just understanding that can really help in so many ways, and also in terms of going for things. You'll often hear the question, if you knew you had a month to live, how would you spend that month? Well, why not apply that to your whole life? If you knew you had 70 years to live, what would you do differently? Like, it sounds crazy, like we all deep down know, but when you actually are not afraid to say it and acknowledge it in its true form, the same power that you'd get from living your life as if you had just a month left, you kind of can get some of that power for your actual full life. So that might be one of mine.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of this quote that says, like, if it's not going to matter in 5 years, then don't spend more than 5 minutes thinking about it.
It's great.
And we spend so much of our day obsessed about these short-term problems that aren't going to matter. Someone cut me off on the freeway. This waiter was really rude to me. This person didn't like my post on Instagram. Or I got a bad haircut, but I guess you're going to remember that 5 years from now.
Because I'm going to be the one who did it.
It's your fault.
It's my fault. I got nowhere to hide.
Accountability.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true.
Jeremy, it's been a pleasure talking today, man. This has been a really, really special episode, and I appreciate all the love you've shown us, but I want to show it right back. I think anyone who listens to this episode is going to feel massively coached, guided, supported, inspired to follow their path, no matter how different it looks to what they plan or dream of. And just want to give a big thanks to you, man, and excited for more people.
No need for thanks, guys.
I
appreciate you having me, guys. And honestly, I mean, we've spoken a lot about strengths, weaknesses, self-development, stuff like that. feel like one of my weaknesses over the years has been showing yourself. You know, it's a tricky one on social media because I'm probably naturally quite a private person, and you know, I enjoy quite a private home life. But it's important also to show yourself as well, for people to see who you really are. And yeah, maybe sometimes over the years people have thought this is the guy who kicks the ball into the top corner, or he's the football skills guy, or he does the skits or the memes or the filter guy. And that's probably my fault for not showing enough of myself. So I'm grateful to you guys for giving me this opportunity and platform to just sit down and talk and just be myself, just be normal.
Awesome. Yeah, this has been really incredible. Now the world also knows you don't spend enough time with your wife.
I know.
They'll take this away.
That's the takeaway.
He's the guy who doesn't spend time with his wife. Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
That's funny.
I love it.
I'm going to work on that.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks, man. Thank you so much. Jeremy, that was dope.
Thank you, guys.
That's a wrap.